I call this committee of the whole meeting to order for the Davenport Community School District. The first item on our agenda, there's two items on the agenda for this meeting. The first item is a report on the Return to Learn plan from the superintendent. Dr. Grabowski, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I have a letter that went out to our staff this afternoon. It was a result of conversations with the County Health Department over the course of the last 2 days. This letter will also be sent to all of our families tomorrow morning and posted on our website and translated for all of our families. So I think for the sake of clarity,
City of Davenport.
I will read directly from the letter that was sent to staff today and the letter that will be going out to families tomorrow. So it's Return to Learn Plan Update dated July 16th, 2020. We know that there have been many questions regarding the Davenport Community School District's Return to Learn plan for the fall. While we don't have complete answers to all of these questions due to the rapidly changing nature of the virus within Scott County, the entire DCSD team has been working diligently to vet the return to school plans and determine the safest possible scenario for students and staff to return to school and continue their learning in a healthy and productive way. What we know now is that the school year will resume on Monday, August 24th, 2020, but it will not start off in a full-time face-to-face model. The health and safety of our students, staff, and community is of utmost importance. With the current surge of COVID cases in our region and the high transmission rate of the virus amongst our young population, we simply cannot have all students and staff back in the classroom for full-time face-to-face learning instruction at the beginning of the 2020-2021 school year. While we had hoped to be back in the classroom on a daily basis to begin the school year, the safety of our students, teachers, and staff and community has led us to remove the on-site only learning from the possible outcomes to begin the school year. This tough decision was made after our most recent weekly meeting with Scott County Health Department officials, who have described the current COVID-19 transmission rate as uncontrolled, unstable, and ascending quickly within the community. We were also told not to expect the numbers to get better in August. What this means is that on Monday, August 24th, school will start with either with a hybrid of required online learning and on-site learning, or a strictly required online-only learning environment. In the hybrid model, each student will attend classes in person 1 day per week and continue their learning in a required online platform for the remaining 4 days. This hybrid model will allow the district to stagger when students are physically in a building, maintain proper social distancing guidelines, keep a recommended minimum number of students per classroom, and most importantly, keep our students, staff, and community safe and healthy. In the required online learning model, students would access their coursework online via either recorded or live sessions or through independent work assigned by the teacher. Each student would be required to log in daily and complete their lessons. The Davenport Community School District's Return to Learn team continues to work diligently to construct all of the finite details of these two models, including answers to frequently asked questions, protocols for safety and sanitation, food and childcare resources, and instructions on how students will access and complete their required coursework. Our ultimate return to learn decision on which learning method we will move forward will be influenced by the status of the state directed by Governor Reynolds, the Iowa Department of Public Health, the Centers for Disease Control, and our local health department with whom we continue to meet weekly. In the coming days and weeks, we will be sending out important information surrounding the final Return to Learn plan and our students and staff return to school. While our ultimate hope was to greet our students this fall in a full-time face-to-face classroom setting, we have to think about the unfavorable impact that model could have on the health and well-being of our students and staff. We know that the health and safety needs of our students and staff could not be met in a full-time face-to-face model. We want to give our families every opportunity to have their children in a learning environment that is productive, educational, and safe, and we know that we will be fully possible within the models that we've outlined. We look forward to starting school again on Monday, August 24th in either a hybrid model or a required online learning platform. Mr. President, that is the letter that will be sent out to parents and students within the community and has been sent out with staff. I wasn't sure if you wanted to have any board discussion or questions this evening. I'll turn the floor back over to you.
Any board members want to make any comments or ask any questions?
Yes, I do have
Director
one
Beck?
question.
I'm sorry, but Director Beck was first, then Director Hayes.
I know you probably don't have the details of this yet, but one of my concerns was with the hybrid model, and is that students who are not in school, who are younger, so elementary age students particularly, may be in childcare settings, right? And we have no control over the health and safety requirements being implemented in those childcare settings. Some of them are state licensed and they would be following appropriate protocols. And we know that daycares are not really hotbeds of infection, and that children tend to not transmit the disease a lot. But I guess my question would be, what is the benefit to just 1 day a week with 4 days a week potentially of childcare issues versus say 3 days a week or 2 days a week, or bringing back one tier of grades versus online for those older students or something like that?
So we looked at, and it was a very good question, and I can assure you we've looked at multiple variants of models that are being considered and being implemented not only across the state but across the country. But to answer your first question, why 1 day a week? It's really a matter of density. And within
Reverend
the
P. Wonder Harris,
for example, we have over 14,000 students in our district, and to have our students properly social distance within a regular classroom setting, especially during this moment of the surge of the virus, we were told it was very important to limit that density to perhaps 6, 7, or 8 students per classroom per day. And that requires us to split our student body into fourths, with a student group A going on Mondays and student group B going on Tuesdays, C on Wednesday, and D on Thursday. And that allows for proper density, not only in the classrooms, but also on the buses that will still run. So it was really a density question. Now, if the transmission rate in Scott County stabilizes, as we're told by the health county that they're hoping that it will someday down the road, we can certainly extend that to a 50% density, which means groups A and B can go on Monday and Tuesday. Groups C and D can go Wednesday and Thursday. So we can scale up this model if the health conditions allow us to do so. We believe we need to start safely, given where the data is right now, and we can certainly scale up quickly if we need to, or that opportunity presents itself.
So to follow up, so 2 questions. One, I had asked sort of what is the advantage of having 25%, or what you guys have determined is the appropriate number of students in a classroom for all grades versus doing, say, in-person learning for lower grades versus online only for some of the upper grades where childcare wouldn't necessarily be an issue. And then my other question is, that 1 day a week that kids are in school, are masks going to be required? I hope.
I'll answer your last question first. We're giving serious consideration to our recommendation that we plan on putting in front of the school board on the 27th of July. We are hearing from county health officials that masks do make a difference. However, there needs to be some flexibility in what that looks like, knowing that younger grades, for example, teachers in a mask aren't going to be able to effectively teach phonemic awareness to students who can't see their lips and pronunciation. So we know there will need to be special situations when it comes to masks. We're putting those recommendations together this week. We're meeting Monday and Tuesday all day to work on that particular topic, as well as a few others, and you'll have that recommendation on the 27th. With regard to, we felt it was important for every single student to have an opportunity to have at least one face-to-face session with their teacher on a weekly basis. I certainly believe and would agree that our older adolescent students are much more adept and adroit at managing an online learning environment, but certainly don't want to dismiss the opportunity for them to at least have a face-to-face environment at least once per week. And we feel that we can safely do that by having no more than 8 students in a classroom, and sending them home every single day and putting them fully online, but only having the elementary students come 1 or 2 days a week didn't seem to serve the purpose of all students, especially from an equity perspective. And again, I anticipate a far more extensive conversation a week from Monday when I have far more details. The reason I made the announcement today is we've now given our families essentially about 6 weeks to start thinking about how are we going to manage this as a family with daycare and personal as well as professional family responsibilities. At least now they know that their children will not be going to school 5 days a week on August 24th. I'm very hopeful that could change somewhere down the road very quickly. This is not a decision that lasts for the entire semester or the entire school year. This is how we're starting the school year. And if the surge subsides and the health department gives us an indication that we can expand our face-to-face opportunities, we'll do so as quickly as we possibly can. Thank you.
Director Hayes?
Okay, a lot of my questions that I had was answered in Dr. K's statement, but one additional question that I had was for the 1 day a week, then does that put the teacher in the classroom every day? And I have some concerns about the disinfectant also with little people, as well as I do, they will not sit still. There's hardly any way to keep them in one place. How do we constantly disinfect to make sure that everything is clean and we're not risking them catching anything while they're out that day?
Again, excellent question. The first question is, yes, a teacher would be, to start the school year, for example, a 3rd grade teacher or a high school teacher, depending on their program, would be in class with anywhere from 5 to 8 students, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. On Friday, they would have an opportunity to meet with their colleagues and plan the next week's lesson, also have office hours for students, have time for students and parents to check in with teachers with any questions that they have or any additional supports that need to take place. So Friday will be a very productive day for teachers in terms of planning as well as additional contact for students. But our teachers will be present in their classroom 4 days a week under the hybrid model. If we go full online, obviously they would not be in the classroom. With regard to the students, the key piece is, and we talked about this with the health department officials, you could have the best plan in the world. It's how you implement the plan and whether people abide by the rules and the regulations and the way we set up the structure of our classroom. We believe that having classrooms of anywhere from 5 to 8 students will allow for proper supervision of adults. The staff-student ratio is really attractive in this environment, especially from a supervision standpoint. So Director Hayes, I would hope that starting on August 24th, if we decide to go with the hybrid model, and again, that's not the definitive model yet, we believe that the staffing ratios would allow us to help students learn the proper safety and sanitation in terms of washing the hands and walking on the right side of the hallway, which we'll tape with a line down it so they know which way to go and what social distancing looks like, and have all of those proper procedures that are recommended not only by the CDC but by the Department of Education, all the other health officials. It'll be far more easier to implement this plan in the small groups if we cut our student population into fourths.
Mm-hmm. Okay, please.
You're welcome.
I have a question about how do both of these plans fit into the 1080 hours that are required by the state?
So they do count as instruction. So, whichever plan that we go with, the state has assured us that the online learning, as long as it is required, as long as we hit the standards that are associated with the coursework, whether that be by course or grade level, that the 1080 requirement is a piece that while it's going to be hard to account for that specifically, it's not something that's going to hang us up. They're far more concerned with making sure that we hit the standards along the way, regardless of what platform we're working under.
Okay, thanks.
Because students will still be assessed on the standards, regardless of the time that they're actually physically in a seat or engaged with their teacher.
Director Postian?
Dr. Kibelski and I have already had a discussion on this, and we've both have stated that we will agree to disagree. I'm against the online learning and the hybrid model. I think we should get all our kids into the school full-time. My concern is what's going to happen to our minorities, our disadvantaged, our special ed students. I feel we are not going to serve those children in an online format. To me, I think this is just taking the easy way out. Yes, it will be tough to have students in the classroom full-time, but I think it's our duty and obligation to try to give them the best education possible and still do it safely. Some of these kids that come to school, they're in school for 6 hours. For some of these kids, that's 6 hours of the only positive reinforcement that they may get each day. And some of these, like one parent told me, she's not COVID privileged. She's a working mom. She has to find daycare. She does not have relatives close by to help her out. So what is it? To me, this is going to be a nightmare for childcare. I've talked to numerous parents, children, and I have not found one person that's in favor of going the online format. Like my neighbor girl told me the other night, she'll be in 4th grade. She said, I hate online learning. I want to be in the classroom with my teacher. This is going to have a huge impact socially and emotionally on these students. They don't have anything really to look forward to. I think there's going to be more problems down the road with discipline because they've been away from a structured format for too long. So for these reasons, I'm totally opposed to online learning and also the hybrid model. Thank you.
Any other comments from the board?
Mr. President,
Director Gosa?
I just had a couple questions. So with the return to learn plan, are there things in place for like our special needs students that might require that being in that classroom setting as part of their IEP or something like that? What are we doing to address those needs of those students? That'll be my first question. I'll let you answer that.
And that's an excellent question. As you know, meeting the needs of our special ed students in the past has been a challenge for the district, and we've certainly righted the ship in many ways. every single student that has an IEP, when we go to either the hybrid or the online model, we'll have to reconvene the IEP team and work through what is needed for those individual students. It's a great deal of work, but our special ed teachers and our new executive director are gearing up for that work, knowing that it has to take place over the course of the next 6 weeks. So we will individualize in every way possible the needs so that our special ed population can have their IEP goals attained based on whether it's the hybrid model or the online model, and make whatever accommodations we have to so that the goals in the IEP are met. But the most important piece is we have to reconvene those IEPs and have those conversations. And as you know, those are large numbers, but we're prepared to do that. And our Mississippi Bend AEA is going to help us with that endeavor to make sure that we reach out and have conversations with every family and every student moving forward. So their needs will be met regardless of the platform that we move forward, and we'll adjust accordingly.
Okay, thank you for that one. I've heard from quite a few parents as well. They could be either way. It all depends on who you talk to, right? You're going to get your answers if you talk to those people. That's just a matter of fact. Anybody can tell you that. I'm glad that we're moving out in front of this and we're giving people, at least 6 weeks notice. At the end of the day, we have to do what's safe for our students, staff, and families. That's part of our mission and vision statement. We read it at we did when we were in person, every board meeting. My other question, so obviously I'm a parent with kids in the district. Is there going to be YouTube channels or something set up? Because say I work all day and then I come home and that's when I got to work with my kids on their schooling. Is there going to be things set in place for that? Or I could go watch a YouTube channel, and I've asked about this for probably 5 years now, and I haven't seen anything yet. But especially like Common Core math just blows my mind, right? And I'm not the only person that thinks that, but that's what comes to my mind right away. But if there's a way for me to go and watch a YouTube channel to walk through a problem or something, or, my kids watch YouTube all the time on every little thing. And that might be a way that we can help students too, not being face-to-face, as well as helping parents.
That's a very good question. And what we learned during our experience from this past spring is we have to utilize both. And I think you've heard us use the terminology synchronous and asynchronous learning, which is, that live right in front, a teacher in the screen in front of you, or recorded lessons, video lessons, links to whether it's Khan Academy or YouTube videos. We are going to use every instructional delivery method at our fingertips that will allow our students to keep pace with the learning standards that we expect them to migrate through. So we will catch them up for the learning that we got a little behind on over the spring, and we have to catch up on those pieces. And then again, we're going to use both the asynchronous as well as the synchronous approach to learning, so that students can, be live with their classmates during the day, but then also have resources in the evening where, if that is better suited for parents to be of help and for students to go get additional supports, we'll make sure that all those resources are available. And the teams have assembled much of that work already, and we'll be putting the finishing touches on that over the course of the next 6 weeks.
Okay, and then my final question, if I don't think of anything else, is there going to be a way for parents to communicate with teachers? So again, say I don't get off work till 5 o'clock and I have a question, or is there going to be not so much an agenda, but maybe like a checklist? You got to do this, this, and this, and then as a parent, I'm able to check those things off. Or, are we going to have it kind of staggered? Obviously, we're going to have some teachers doing online. Are we going to have it staggered where some can be available? Because a lot of them probably have their own children as well that they're at home with. So is there going to be some kind of way to communicate with parents and teachers?
So the communication protocols on the front end won't be dramatically different than some of the ones that we've had already. Traditional email and phone calls, those are all still available, but also there's communication methods that are available through our Google Classroom learning management system. So that's more of a direct contact with teachers. So that won't change at all. With regard to the timing of support, we do realize that some of our educators will not be able to come into school 4 days a week to work with their particular classroom. And we're working on the logistics as to how to share that responsibility where another teacher can fill in. But then to your point, Dan, how can we utilize that teacher who is technically working from home, who perhaps can be a live evening support for students that may have questions and may need some support. So our teacher expectations team is working to see how we can utilize our teachers who, for whatever reasons, personal or professional, perhaps they have a fragile, health condition that requires them to stay home, but they still want to teach. What's the best way to utilize them as a resource for our students, knowing that questions won't always just be at 9 o'clock in the morning. They may come at 9 o'clock at night. Now, we can't have teachers available 24/7. That's just an unrealistic expectation for our entire staff. But if we can assign certain staff members, either by grade level or by subject, who can be a quote-unquote evening tutor of some type, we're looking to investigate how to structure that so that it's not only task manageable for our staff, but also productive for our students.
Okay, perfect. One final thing, you made me think of it.
Sure.
So we're going to obviously have students and staff that have, might have family members of them that they themselves are high risk, okay? Is there going to be the option, instead of doing that one day in person, they can do the full online, or do they have to come if they're high risk, or they have a sibling at home that's high risk, or a parent or something like that? Is that a full requirement that they are going to have to at least go that one day, or is there going to be some kind of variance there?
So we have been receiving information from families that have suggested to us that if in any way, shape, or form we have in-person, face-to-face classes, that they will not be sending their students to those classes, either because of health concerns or issues with the student or family members. We will definitely offer a full online opportunity for our families if they choose not to participate in a hybrid model or any sort of face-to-face model that we go to. We do realize there are situations that would require and meet the expectations of our families from a safety perspective. We'll lay out what that'll look like for you on the 27th of July, but to allay the fears of family members that are thinking that if we go to a hybrid, their student is required to go to school one day a week, that will not be the case. They will not be required. We will have a full online program available for those families that for like I said, for whatever reason, especially from a health perspective, are comfortable sending their kid to any face-to-face situation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I would just like to say this is one of those decisions that will please some people and will displease others. It's a solution to a problem that is not of our making. We've been dealt a set of cards that we have to play. And, some parents, the online learning will work for some children. It will be very difficult for others. Parents will be nervous about sending their child on one day a week. Others would send their kids 5 days a week. Others would send their kids 6 days a week to school. There are going to be parents that are going to think this online learning is swell till about mid-October, when it's like, I've got to get this kid to sit down on the computer again. But whether kids are in school or at home, you've always had those kids who you had to sit on to get them to do their work. As I say, it's not quite damned if we do and damned if we don't, but we're splitting the difference to some degree. And we can hope that the public will follow the prescribed health procedures and wear their masks and keep social distancing so the curve can fall down and we can get back to having kids in classrooms where they want to be, where their parents want them to be, and where their teachers want them to be. I just have a couple of people have asked questions online here, and we don't usually refer to them, but several of them are asking about sports and athletic activities, if we know anything with respect to that.
So as of right now, we are not opening up our weight rooms, and we're not engaging in any activities with regard to sports. That would include extracurricular activities with regard to band, and I know a lot of people are interested in that right now, but the reality of it is the language that I am hearing from county health officials is we are in the midst of a significant surge. This surge, as I stated in my letter, is unstable and it is accelerating. And we've heard terms that any efforts to put groups of people together at this moment in time would be problematic. I've heard even stronger language than that. So we are going to take a look at our athletics and our extracurricular activities on a week-to-week basis. But for the remainder of this week and all of next week, we will not be engaged in any extracurricular activities until, as you mentioned, Mr. President, we're starting to see a flattening of the curve. And Dr. Katz, who is the one of our more eminent medical advisors in the county, has suggested that if we see 14 days of declining transmission rates, then we can feel safe about reopening some of the activities that we would normally have with our students, and being very conservative in doing those activities outdoors in the fresh air as opposed to the confines of a sweaty weight room, for the sake of argument, which one health official described as a petri dish. So we certainly don't want to move in that direction yet. I'm hopeful that we'll start seeing a decline in the transmission rates, but science is going to dictate the solution to this, and that's what I'm committed to.
Director Beck.
Just a follow-up, and I know you'll get into details at our next regular meeting. Two questions. One, should we find that a large number of families opt for online only, are we flexible enough to adjust to putting students in the classroom 2 days a week if there's few enough students who are willing to do that, or something like that? Like, do we have a fair amount of flexibility built into this plan?
That would be a mathematical equation. Okay. Determined by how many students are deciding not to participate in face-to-face instruction. And if the math allows us in a 900 square foot classroom to keep students socially distanced 6 feet apart, then certainly we could increase those numbers in terms of the number of days that they come. So that's a math question, quite really, and we'll just have to see how it plays out based on the decisions that families make between now and August 24th.
Okay, and then since we happen to have some of our city officials on the line, we do know that the science says that wearing masks in public helps reduce transmission. Washing hands reduces transmission. We know that contacting surfaces it's not a high risk of transmission from contacting surfaces. It's spending time together in closed places without social distancing or masks. So I guess I would advocate, one, masks required. And I understand there are some situations where a person may need a face shield instead or something like that. The second question is, can we, as a community, because we know the science says that masks work with the city and the health department to blitz the community to require masks in public? I know the governor's having issues dictating that, with people dictating that, but it's clear that we need to do something. So is there a way for us to work with the city to mandate masks publicly, at least for a month or two, so that we can start to decrease the transmission. The goal of getting people back into classrooms, mask up to open up, I think is what I've heard. We all want our kids in school. My student's a strong student, but he hated online schooling. He is not going to be happy about this, but he understands. And so if we can get everyone on board, what can we do? What can the city do to help us with that, I guess, is my question.
Bruce, this is Corey. Do you want me to take that? So legally, the city cannot mandate it. The governor has been very clear about that. And we have a formal ruling from the Attorney General that we do not have jurisdiction while she has control of the emergency proclamation. So the city has no legal authority to do that.
Okay.
Allison, you're muted.
I'd like to move on, if we can, to the next item on the agenda. Is that okay with everyone? Hearing no objections, we shall forge ahead. Our next item is a discussion on the school resource officers. Our outline for tonight is Dr. Kobelski will be giving an overview of the SRO, and we have allotted the NAACP a half an hour to do some conversation and presentations for us. Then we have some city officials online, the mayor, the police chief, several others, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. So I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Kobelski.
Thank you, Mr. President, and appreciate the opportunity. And thank you to all of our community partners who are willing to engage in what is a very important conversation. And in terms of common ground, all of us are here this evening to make our community a better community. And I'm convinced of that. And I'm very positive that our ongoing conversations will result in positive outcomes. But let me begin by offering a school perspective on the SRO program. And I'm going to refer to it as a program as opposed to individuals. I know we tend to look and see the SROs for the individuals who they are, but we have to remember from an educational perspective, there was a purpose to the SRO program, and that purpose was to bring in law enforcement officials to allow them the opportunity to start building proactive relationships with students in a friendly, no stress, non-confrontational sort of a way, as opposed to having our students having their first or perhaps only interaction with law enforcement officials in perhaps a more unadvantageous environment. And so SRO programs were really born of an idea to help even from a social worker perspective to have our resource officers again start building relationships with kids, having conversations with kids, advising students, being a role model, being a mentor, and being someone that ideally students would feel comfortable either reaching out to or at least having conversations with. And the programs that I've been involved with in my more than 2 decades as an administrator have focused on that relationship building attribute. And I've seen the positive results of that. I've seen school resource officers, having pizza at a table with students in a cafeteria and just talking about their weekend and things like that. And we know from research that, and again, I'm not trying to generalize, but we do know it's important for our students to develop positive relationships with adults that goes beyond just their teachers. And SROs over time have proven to build many of those positive relationships. And in all my years as an administrator and as a teacher, I've seen the benefits of the program. In all of my years, I've only seen one incident where a particular individual was just not suited for this type of work. This is specialized law enforcement work that has a very high social, emotional, relationship orientation to it. And if done right and done well, I've seen it have positive attributes for a school system. Unfortunately, the SRO program changed in context back in April of 1999 after Columbine. And one of the aspects that really changed was the whole notion of having law enforcement officials available at the ready in the event of active shooter situations at schools, and that has only been exacerbated since 1999. And I don't have to go over the list of situations that have come up where law enforcement close at hand is important. Again, citing research, we know that when it comes to serious situations in a school building, especially active shooter situations, 6 minutes is a very important demarcation point. If students and staff and anyone who's in a school environment that's unfortunate enough to be involved in an active shooter situation, the data suggests that if you can survive the first 6 minutes, you're more likely to survive well beyond that. And the key ingredient is to have an intervention as early as possible. So what we've seen since 1999 is a little bit more of a shift from sort of the DARE officer-friendly relationship building orientation of our SRO program to more of a safety. It's better to have officers 30 seconds away from the bad guys, so to speak, as opposed to 6 minutes away. And in some situations, perhaps in some districts, that has come out of balance, and I could certainly understand that. The other piece is I would certainly like to acknowledge the need for additional resources at the school level in the areas of social emotional support for our students and families. As I look at our school district, having been here for a year now, I do believe that we need to reorient our priorities, not only from a fiscal perspective, but also from a student support perspective. I would like to see more school psychologists and more social workers within our system. I believe it's a need based on what I'm seeing from our students. And I would hope that from an allocation of resources perspective, we would certainly take a look at that as a school system to see how we can accommodate what is clearly a growing need. Two other final points, and then I'll just turn things back over to you, Mr. President. The other important piece is when it comes to whether it's SROs, school safety, curriculum, whatever the case, there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all model. And I know there's a great deal of research out there that's national, that a lot of people have relied on. I've stated a couple of those pieces this evening. But I think it's very important to take a look at our community and meet the needs of our community, and more specifically, meet the needs of our students. I would strongly suggest that we start to develop very intensive and rapidly growing focus groups with our students and ask our students what they would like to see change within our school system from a social emotional perspective. How can we take an SRO program and make it meet the needs more effectively for our students and hear directly from them, as opposed to having all of the adults sitting in the room assuming and making decisions for our students. So I would be very supportive of creating very focused focus groups of our students who would get together and help us discuss this SRO conversation in more detail from a student perspective, and I would very much like to hear from them directly. And then my last point, Mr. President, is when it comes to decisions like this, it doesn't necessarily have to be binary in the sense that it's either all yes or all no. I think it would be important that any program, and going back to the beginning of my comments, that we're not talking about individuals, I'm talking about the SRO program, to effectively evaluate the program and decide its worth and its value to the system. And if it's something that we do value, how do we make it better from an idea of continuous improvement? So in addition to reaching out to our students and having conversations with them, I would do so in a more formal evaluative sort of a way, so we can get our minds wrapped around what is it that we would really like to see accomplished. And it might not necessarily have to be a yes or no or an either or situation, but I'm very anxious and excited to have this conversation with our community. It's a worthy conversation. And it's important conversation. And as I said at the very beginning, we all have the same goal in mind, which is to have a better community and to support our students and children in every way possible. And having this conversation is very important. But this is my perspective from an educational perspective, Mr. President, and I know we have other perspectives coming this evening, and I'll yield my time to you. Thank you.
Mr. Roberson?
Yes, good evening. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Larry Robertson, and I'm the president of the Davenport branch of the NAACP. And I want to say to the superintendent and the school board and all of the staff, and to my executive committee and education committee, and all people on the line listening, thank you for being here and participating in this discussion. It goes deeper for me than just police officers in school. Back when Mr. Floyd had a knee on his neck and everybody saw that, right away it was a rush to the police officers. But it goes much deeper than just the police officers. If you take a look at what goes on in the health community, economic community, and then finally you get down to the education committee, they all play a part in the knee on the neck. And it's time for people to understand that they do have to make changes. The police department has to make changes. The educational system has to make changes. And as I've been talking to Fortune 500 companies and the city of Davenport and the police department, I've all told them the same thing. They contribute to what we see each and every day when you have little kids that will hide from the police department and they haven't done anything wrong because of what they have been taught and that they are afraid of them. We have to, at some point in time, make some changes. And the way that I say we make changes is making sure that in all the areas that I have discussed that we have diversity, from the bottom of the ladder all the way up to the top of the ladder. And today, if I went into the police department, the school system, healthcare, education, the city, would I see that? And I'll let you answer that question. And when people don't see people that look like them, it makes a tremendous difference in how they view things. From having been a former school board member and having had 2 kids go through the Davenport school system, kids were always talking to me. And the conversation that they were having, a lot of time, they weren't good. They were talking about how they had been treated. Or they talked about the grade they got for making the same score as their white counterpart. So I'm just saying is that there are a lot of things that go, and we can't just tie it down to say where should there be police officers in school, and one model doesn't fit all. I've had a lot of people call me. I've had a lot of people talk to me. And it's been both ways. Some say yes, some say no.
Nyrink
Beg pardon?
Is now joining.
Okay, so what I say is that we have to continue making sure that we have high expectation for all of our kids and that the out of school time, and we'll have data next week to verify this, that out of school time is not disproportionately people of color, because if you're not in the classroom, you can't live. And I'm asking the school board that you need to play a major role in making sure that these things are shaped the way they should be, making sure that there are people in the system, in the classroom, in the administration building that look like the rest of us. And I'm saying is that that's part of the problem. And also, too, is that to the police department, they have to do some things different in terms of their training. And because people, for the most part, of color do not trust the police. They say that things go on that should not go on. So, economically, we've got things to do. Educationally, we got things to do. And I'm not going to take up all of the time because there are other people that want to speak on some different subject matters. But the one thing I would like to say before I turn it back over to the president is that, I want to say thank you to Black Lives Matter, because if they had not been protesting, a lot of things that we are talking about today would not be going on. And I would tell you that this will not be the only conversation that we have about policing in school and about diversity and all of the other things that go on that tend to have a disproportionate effect on Black and brown people. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to follow then the order So it would be Reverend Harris. You're up.
Yes, Mr. President, can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and to President Tu and to all the board members. I'm 65 years old. I pastor Mount Zion Church in East Moline. I'm originally from, I have grandkids in the Davenport school system. So I was born in 1955 in a place called Rienzi, Mississippi. And so what I want to share with you today is an insight as to how do we deal with racism. I have a calendar. Maybe everyone can see that. We're all familiar with the calendar. We use the calendar today to schedule this meeting. And most people see the calendar and you see it has some kind of advertising on it. The one I have here says insurance company, State Farm. Well, we use the calendar without even thinking about how it impacts our lives. But we do know we needed to keep up with the dates. What people don't recognize is that the calendar comes to us from the church. Pope Gregory XIII gave us what's called the Gregorian calendar, October 4th, 1582. And just as the calendar impacts all areas of our lives, so does racism. Actually, the church created racism. And because the church gave moral authority to racism by valuing some people and devaluing others. And in that devaluing, it allowed people then to disconnect a sense of conscience so they could do anything they wanted to the person, sell them, lynch them, enslave them, do medical experiments, a whole lot of things that were done to black people, and conscience was removed by those who did it. For instance, the Tuskegee experiment, there's a whole lot of stuff you can check as it relates to that. And so when you can devalue a person, then it doesn't matter what you do to them. When we look at George Floyd and the police officer having his knee on the neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, you want to know, where did he get that sense of authority from? Well, it comes because we've been conditioned in this nation to see some people as less than and other people as more valuable. Now, all the press, because when they do it, there's a body. Undeniable, there's a body. But when a banker does it, a person don't get a loan. When a teacher does it in the classroom, a student either don't get the assistance they need or fail to get the kind of direction that points them in a different direction. So there's a lot of things that happen in the name of disvaluing and devaluing. The reason I bring this church aspect to it, because I know that as a school system, we tend to not want to have the church or religion involved in the education process. But I hope that you understand that racism was started by the church, and yet we've got to deal with it. And so I come to you representing the church in this presentation. There was a package sent to each of you that would have had a copy of the Genesis 9 from the Dake's Annotated Bible. And I hope you got that. The Dake's Bible is used in pulpits all across America. A bunch of people, pastors, use them. But Dake's in Genesis chapter 9 suggests that all people were white until the days of Noah, and then suggests that Christ was white. Well, that's nowhere in the scriptures at all. That's something that's passed by tradition. And racism, what we'll find is racism is based on 3 points. First is a belief. Secondly, you have laws that are laws and procedures that are put in place. And then third, you have a social order. Well, when we check the scriptures, we find that there is no such thing as color being defined. Genesis chapter 10, God divided the nations by land, language, families, and nation. He does not divide people by color. From Genesis to Revelation, there are people certainly of different color, but they're not divided that way. That's a tradition that has come from man. The reason that's important is because all of us have been impacted by it. All of us. Our nation has, the Virginia Assembly passed laws making white superior in the law and black inferior in the law. and then slaves for life and runaways easy to identify by color. That's important because as we seek to reconcile, we wonder, well, where do we start? Well, we start with the truth. Chief Justice Taney, in that Dred Scott decision, said, that's in 1857, he said that the Negro had no rights that a white man was bound to respect. Well, that's 1857. Fast forward a few years later, the 13th Amendment is passed, which abolished slavery. Well, it seems like everybody's free at that point. You talk about the SRO and the police department. Well, check this out. The southern states, the Bible states, they passed what's called the Black Codes. Because when the 13th Amendment abolished slavery, they lost that slave labor. Well, they were wondering what to do after that. So they created the Black Codes and then had police to arrest. For instance, if a black person didn't have a job, they could be arrested for vagrancy or loitering. And then once arrested, they'd have this high fine that they couldn't pay. So therefore, they were forced to work it off. So then the sheriff would hire them out to work on a farm or the sugar canes or coal mines or wherever to pay off the fine. So black people were policed differently. So he asked, well, why don't we have this come by y'all, we love the police moment? It's because policing was different for black people. Slave time, you had the slave patrol. Then even after the 13th Amendment abolished slavery, you had the Black Codes and police deliberately arresting black people for the least of offense. I mentioned the not having a job and being arrested for vagrancy. Well, a white person could claim poverty and not be arrested. So our history with the police has been far different than you might have experienced. So the question is, what do we do about it? How do we move forward from here? Well, the point that I sense is that we have to recognize that we have had over the years an idea about inferiority and superiority that was based on a lie. We have to acknowledge that. And then what we've done is that we presented a concept, what's called recognizing the value of all people. Our current language doesn't permit that because we use terms like minorities, we use minority, majority, then there are other terms that are used to suggest difference. All of us are human beings. All of us have high potential. So we present what's called the diamond idea of recognizing people. But all of us are diamonds. All of us have value. Some of us, as a diamond, might be a diamond in the rough, but that means we still have value and that potential is not yet realized. As I talk with as I look at various ones, I use three diamonds. One is the black diamond, the champagne diamond, and the crystal diamond, representing various people. When you think about a person in terms of a diamond, you automatically understand a diamond has value. And when you suggest the color just describes what it is, but you automatically know it has value. When you use the term black man, white man, so forth, each time the adjective on the front suggests something out of our history. So my point of this presentation tonight is that as we look at kids, sometimes you look at them in terms of income. Are they from a low-income family? Well, low income doesn't mean low potential or low possibilities. So if teachers would look at students as diamonds in the rough, and I've asked police department to look at people that they arrest as diamonds in the rough as opposed to thugs, it allows them all to approach people from a standpoint of value. The SRO, while is a police officer, we come from a different history as it relates to police officers. So therefore, I suggest that we rethink and revisit what is the role of the SROs in the school. None of us want to have our kids exposed to shootings and those kinds of things, and I get that. But let's reevaluate what is the SRO's role in the school as it relates to school safety, and not have it be a place where we have young black kids developing a police record while they're in school that come 18, it's ready there because we talk about the school, the pipeline, the prison. We don't want to participate in that. We want to remove that idea and help our kids to become all that they can possibly be. So that's what as I close, that's my point, is let's consider that racism started. All of us have been impacted by it, but there's a way out if we just review it and look at each person as value. Thank you for your time, Mr. President.
Thank you, Reverend. Ms. Upchurch Taylor? Charlene Upchurch Taylor, are you there?
Yes, I am. My microphone was muted. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's good. You're next on our agenda, ma'am.
I'm next. Okay. I taught on the Illinois side for 38 years and since have retired. My own kids went through the Davenport school system, and now my grandkids are. And I guess my concern is interactions have been so negative about the police and with the police, the media, family members, and these students in the schools. They're aware of everything. They're more aware than what we are, all the videos and the killings and the wrong that is being done. And if we're not addressing these concerns, then we're not helping our students, because we have that opportunity. And I agree with you, Dr. Klobisky, when you were talking about what is needed to get that interaction with the students. I believe that this is a perfect time to get student leaders, but not only just positive student leaders, but those that are negative, and pulling them together to make those decisions on ownership, responsibility, leadership, teaching them leadership, and also adults actually listening to them on how do they see the SROs within the school district, and probably teaching students how to de-escalate. The skills should be taught to how to de-escalate fights and problems and verbal communication that they're into. And I guess that's my concern. I believe that we need to get students more involved in this process.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Brockington? Dr. Brockington, you may unmute, please. You're up on the agenda, sir.
Okay, my name is Dr. Henry Brockington. I've been asked to present the communication between DCAP, which is the Davenport Community Advisory Panel, and the police department and the community. The Davenport Community Advisory Panel is a committee composed of 5 organizations with a maximum of 3 members from each organization. It was organized 7 years ago because of meetings between the then director of the Civil Rights Commission and local organizations, mostly minority organizations, and their concerns. And one of the chief concerns was racial profiling in traffic stops. Our charge is to monitor those stops and make recommendations to the Davenport Police Department to correct those incidents. The data collected by the Davenport Police Department traffic stops is analyzed by a third party and presented to the police department and to us, DCAP. It has been shown that there is racial profiling in the traffic stops. And after discussions about the analyzed data, then an arrangement is made to present the conclusion to the community. And the discussions is usually with DCAP and the police department. Some of the recommendations that we have made to the police department have been accepted, and they've used them in training and in hiring, etc. And the police department themselves have also come up with recommendations based on our discussion. We meet with the Davenport Police Department on a regular basis, once a month, in a continuing process of attempting to improve the practice involved in the traffic stops and improve the communication between the Davenport Police Department and the Davenport community. The Davenport branch of the NAACP Local 419 and LULAC have been meeting with the Davenport Police Department Chief, the Davenport City Administrator, the Bettendorf Police Department Chief, the Bettendorf City Administrator, and the Scott County Sheriff in a continuous discussion of their departments and the resolutions of things such as racial profiling, transparency, practices, implicit bias, training, diversity, etc., and in hopes to make some reform that we think are necessary with those departments. I'll take any questions if there are questions. And I'd like to thank the board for the opportunity to make this presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Brockington. Now on our agenda, it's for city officials, either the mayor, the police chief, to offer their perspective and information on our SROs. Mayor Mattson, Chief Sikorsky?
Yes, I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sorry. I was trying to figure out Corey's phone. Thank you first off for having us involved in this meeting. Like the other speakers talked about, this is absolutely an important topic for us to discuss. And I will keep mine very short. I will tell you all that I'm very much for having school resource officers in our Davenport community schools. I do believe that we should take a hard look at what the expectations are for our SROs. I think we need to take a hard look at consistency in operations, consistency in application throughout throughout all the schools, how they're being used by the administrators. I think we should take a look at memorandums of understanding, not just on a financial basis, so how they're funded, but to also have MOUs regarding operations, performance, expectations, those kind of things as well. So the officers that are engaged and working at our schools have a clear understanding what they're there for. My primary purpose for having officers within our schools is, and I think Dr. Kabilski covered most of this in his opening with this, and I think some of the other speakers covered some of it as well. And it really comes down to positive interactions with our kids. I've had discussions over the last several years with many of the speakers here about the perceptions by some of our community members, and we all have seen that during this really difficult time in policing and in our communities. And I think it's imperative that we have positive police encounters, and we need to have police officers with our kids. And there's no better place to do that than within our schools. I agree. A perfect year would be 0 arrests in any of our schools by any of our police officers, including our SROs. We have great opportunities to engage with our kids at lunch tables, in classrooms, and at different classes that we have the opportunity to teach and to talk at. I take advantage of those often. I think that there are definitely improvements that we can make within our system. Within our systems, we have many people listening to this this board meeting that are instrumental in that. I love the idea of getting some of our students involved with these conversations as well. So I think there are many things that we can do. I think the other thing is that our SROs need to be trained as SROs. They need to have great training. We do train ours; they're nationally trained, but I think that needs to continue as well. And any additional training that we can do with the SROs and school staff together would enhance that program as well. Mr. President, thank you for the opportunity, and I wanted to make sure everybody on the call know that you were one of my teachers at Studlow back in junior high.
Thank you for dating me.
That wasn't intentional, sir.
Mayor Mattson, is there anything you'd like to add?
I would, please. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Potts, the board, Dr. K, and all community members, NAACP, for allowing us to speak tonight on the SRO discussion. So I think, but I don't want to assume, everybody knows my background. I will be starting my 18th year at Davenport Central High School. I grew up here, and so I have, I think, a unique experience in this subject and others, but it's just, so it's one experience. So what I see many days is an SRO at Central High School, but I go to West because many of my students, we have students in my program at Central from West, from Central, from Mid-City, from Assumption, from Bettendorf, on other occasions, other districts, but our primary students are Central and West and Mid-City. Been doing it for 18 years. So I have seen the evolution of SROs, or evolution of the schools and the relationships with our police. And then I've been an alderman in the city for, well, now my 13th year, and now I'm the mayor. A couple common things that I've seen and heard, and folks on this call have asked the city and asked some of our leaders in coordination and communication with you is to find ways to develop trust, competence, mentorship, relationships, and we as educators, I think, I certainly don't speak for any, but I think we talk about a lot and we believe in relationship building is critical both to learning and positive life experiences, etc. So when we talk about police and the community discussions that we're having now, my experience says that we should keep SROs. And what I have seen and what I continue to see, especially for the two SROs at Central and West, which I have the most contact with or witness their interactions, but I certainly see the other ones because I go to every intermediate school multiple times a year and every high school. North probably the least, but certainly Central. I live there, and then the other schools. We have been pushed to find positive relationship building opportunities for our youth and our police and the trust development process. I can't think, and I'm only one, but it's hard to me to see one of or a better opportunity than when we have a police officer at a lunch table at Central High School having lunch and discussing whatever it is they're discussing with some of our youth, especially youth that don't look like me, especially our male youth. I see that interaction most every day. I watch it. I see it develop. And the SROs at Central, again, and West aren't people that look like me. They're some of our finest officers. And they have volunteered to take this on and go into our schools with the intent of helping mentor and show a positive relationship or build a positive relationship with our students. Certainly, other aspects, as previous folks talked about, and Dr. K mentioned a bit, that we have students, and just right before COVID, experiencing and executing Alice drills. We have kids deciding and working and thinking about how do I get out of a situation where there might be an active shooter, and we practice that
And when the officer is there to help assist and then maybe react to that person in seconds versus minutes is embedded into how we might or might not, with our students, survive. So that's a piece. But I want to stress what I see is the importance of this, is that trust factor, the relationship building, and I witness it, and I've seen it a lot. And we talk about de-escalation. I have seen the officers where there might be situations where I have seen, and others have seen, that maybe we think a more consequential action should have been taken with a student, but the officer, because they have learned to know who the kids are, they have built relationships, they talk with them, they know them, maybe they can, and in some cases exactly have, de-escalated and worked with the child to get through that situation of whatever's causing their anger, instead of just showing up when we call them for a situation, which then basically transforms into them being put in a squad car. But I've witnessed them de-escalate situations because they've had the relationships with the students and worked with them. I agree with everybody that has spoken that we need to work on and develop metrics, as the chief said, with more specifics. I agree that the social service aspect, from a partnership aspect, I believe, and we've talked about that here at the city, we've had this partnership with increasing SROs and a private entity. I think a partnership in increasing the social, whether it's worker or mental health or other those sides, absolutely needs to be increased. And we can do that. And we can work on all those other things and still have SROs in our buildings to serve as mentors. We have been pushed hard for hiring, as Mr. Robertson has talked about, and we're working on a communication strategy, and we've got folks now dedicated on our city staff to bring in more diversity into all of our departments. But the mentorship program that the police officers provide to our youth to help them understand what it is to be a professional adult police officer, firefighter, etc., other city administrator, it is hard to equate unless the person is there with the youth, working with them on a daily basis. You take that out, I don't know where you necessarily get that. So we've been pushed to find trust and relationship building and ways to interact positively with police and youth. I think the SRO, certainly we can improve it. Certainly I would look forward to be part of discussions, and I know our chief and city administrator and many others in the city would look forward to working with the school board, the NAACP, LULAC, Dr. K, to develop a more concise, maybe focused metric system for what our SROs really we need them to do, and the guidance to have what we want out of that program. So absolutely that we should do that. But I would be very concerned if we just stopped and took that away, because I see the experience firsthand on the positive side of this program, and the mentorship and relationship and trust building that these guys provide to our youth. So I thank you very much for the opportunity to talk. I would look forward to increasing some of the things we're talking about, or improving some of the things we're talking about from the social aspect, whether it's social worker side or other sides or mental health, to increase, and then also work to improve the SRO program, but to really keep it in our schools. Thank you for your time, Mr. Potts, and all the members that are on this call.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One more person. I'd like Bruce McKee, he's Director of Security for the district, to share some information with us.
Thank you, Mr. Potts. The relationship between the Davenport School District and the police department goes back decades. Having security officers in our buildings goes back to the 80s, when Dave Struckman started working at Central High School And he was chosen because of his relationship capacity with students, the relationships he had with families in the community, and they knew that he would make a positive impact in the buildings. About 1985, I'm thinking of my notes here, they decided that they wanted to expand the program into the other high schools. North specifically wanted to bring an officer into the program because they saw the positive results of things that were happening at Central. Struckman again stepped up and helped train the officers who then started working part-time at North and West. Going back to about 1990 or so, when Mr. Potts was a principal at a school in a neighborhood that was having issues, then Captain Van Fossen decided that he was going to put an officer down in the neighborhood, not to work as a police officer, but to work as a mentor, to work as a friend, somebody to build relationships with the students who are causing problems down that area. He sat at the lunchroom with these kids, talked with them, became friends with them, and he spread that out to other schools in the district, and it worked. And they said to him, the school district came to him and said, we want you to do this full time. We want you to be part of our staff. And that's really the first full-time liaison police officer that the school district had. And the program has continued and grown as needed to present day. Dr. Kavilsky brought up Columbine. That was really a critical changing point for the SRO program. And at that time, Dr. Amelia, who was with Julio Almanzo, asked for us to put full-time officers at West. So we put a full-time officer at West. And as it progressed, Henry Hawkins, who was the officer who worked with Bruce Potts down at his building, retired, and Mike Cole took over. This was, again, about the same time where we needed to start looking at things that were new to us, like emergency operation planning. Mike was instrumental in not only creating that plan, but also bringing in our civilian security force, which all the people that Mike chose were community-minded men that could make positive impact with kids. The program, as it is today, and the people that work in the program today are selected because they have the ability to have positive influence with our students, to mentor, and they like working with kids. They are not there because they want to make arrests or to be a negative force, if you will, in the buildings. They're there because they believe in the kids and they want to work with them and make positive things happen in the building for them. It doesn't mean that arrests don't happen. It's not what they choose to do. But the primary focus for everybody that we have in the building that are our SROs is relationships with our kids. That's it.
Thank you. Open up for questions from the board. Director Beck.
Sorry, the sun is coming in a window at a weird angle now. So first of all, I want to thank everyone who is here today sharing their perspectives with us. I really appreciate it as a board member. I guess I have two questions, really. First of all, I'd like to hear a little bit from, I believe it was Ms. Upchurch Taylor and Dr. Brockington, who on their agenda both listed the willingness to participate in a Q&A from their perspective. So I guess as a school board, from a teacher's perspective and as a community member perspective, what would you all like to see the school board do in terms of policies that you think might be able to help improve the relationship of the police department and the Davenport School District?
That's
Well,
this is Charlene. That's where I believe that you get your students involved and get them to participate and give you ideas, because they do have opinions. And I do believe SROs are very important in a school district. I don't think you should get rid of them. I think there's a purpose. But I also believe that students need to have an opinion and how they're looking at the SROs, and maybe more programs to sit them down together. And I just think it would be very beneficial if they were to show ownership, leadership, especially with your negative students. It gives them a perfect time to get them in a role to show that leadership that you want them to have in the school district. And you give them a say-so.
this is Dr. Brockington. Well, first of all, I don't know if that answered your question, but can you hear me?
Yes.
Am I muted?
Yes,
We can hear you.
Okay. Well, my basis for what I was asked to do is to see what kind of relationship that we have as a result of DCAP with the police department, and how that might be helping the Davenport community to understand the police department. And one of the things we think it does, what it will do and have done, is it tends to show some of the transparency. And we haven't finished with that. That's why it's a continuing, ongoing communication. And we meet with the Davenport Police Department once a month, and then we meet at DCAP once a month among ourselves. And with the other phase of this, it is showing what the NAACP local branch, and also with the LULAC, that we have been meeting with the Davenport Police Department and the city administrators, the Bettendorf Police Department and their administrators, and the county sheriff in the continuing discussions of their departments, and looking for any reform that we think might be needed for such things as racial profiling and transparency of the departments and practices of the departments, and any implicit bias, which we all have, and the training and more diversity in departments. So that's, again, hopefully to get a better understanding, a better communication, a better understanding of what happens with the police department and the transparency of it. And as a result of our meetings, I think we have made some communications that have helped to get at least some understanding of the police departments and a continuing process of trying to improve that communication.
Thank you. I guess my other question then is, do we have data on actual numbers on the types of interactions that our SROs have with students? For example, how often do our school resource officers interact with students in a sit down for lunch versus are they called in for discipline versus are they involved in performing some other role? Do we track those types of interactions and with which students those are occurring? And that would be a question for Chief Sikorsky, I believe, to answer.
This is Chief Sikorsky. How did I know that was for me? I think the simple answer is no, we don't have great data, as far as I know, for those positive, casual, mentoring type of encounters. I think that would be hard to measure. However, if we could try to measure that over a school year, I think that wouldn't be difficult for an individual officer to do. But I don't have any statistics, at least in front of me, that measures that. And I guess I agree with you. I think that would be really good to see what the proportions were.
Yeah, I'm asking just because I feel like it might go a long way in informing us as to what role the SROs are actually playing versus what roles we would like them to play in our schools, and whether they're having positive more positive or more negative reactions with different populations. So it might be something to consider, to try for a year. I know this year is kind of a strange year, but to see if we could have individual officers track that somehow.
Yeah, we'll discuss that as we move further with this. Thank you for that.
Other questions from the board?
President Potts, I don't have a question, but I do pretty much have a statement.
Director
First
Hayes,
of all,
go
thank
ahead.
you. Thank you. Thank everyone who is participating with your input. That's very valuable. Right now, there's so many different things going on. You can see the negatives in the SROs as well as the positives. In sitting in some of our expulsion hearings, I can think of, a couple cases where they're very necessary, because without them, we have no idea how the situations would have went. On a positive note, we've had the interaction, which kind of stretches out to nets too, whether it's in the neighborhood or whether it's in the schools. A lot of the students need to build these relationships with the police officers, because as it's been mentioned, I think, by Mr. Roberson, Pastor Harris, and a few others, African American children do have a fear of the police. Reason being, for whatever reason, you see family members taken away with cuffs, and there is a negative connotation that comes with that, and I would like to change it. But I think the key here is, as adults, neither one of us are in the building at that level on a regular basis, and I do agree that this is a decision that we do need input from students. They're at the buildings each day. They know what the relationships are, and I think their input would be very valuable for us at this point, because we can't really force feed them one thing or another when we're not there 7 hours a day to know what's actually going on. And I think it's unfair for us to really make that decision. But again, I can see the positive and the negative in it, but I would like to see what the students prefer.
Thank you, Director Hayes. Director Klein-Jerome, did you have a question?
I also just kind of have a comment. Having taught in this district for over 32 years, I remember when I taught kindergarten and Officer Friendly came in, to build that relationship at a very early age in school. And I realize we haven't found that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow to fund everything, but that was a really good program, to have young kids interact with police officers, and not just when they saw somebody being arrested. I also, again, at the elementary level, the DARE program brought in officers to work with kids. And again, we've kind of left out the elementary kids, who really, that's where we need to start building these relationships with the police. I also was at Central when Officer Lopez was our SRO, and I watched him in the hallway interacting with kids. Kids would come up and talk to him. There wasn't this fear that, oh, he's a police officer. He understood if something went on in the neighborhood, there was a good possibility it was coming to school, and oftentimes it did. It was nice to have that person in the building that could make that connection, that because of troubles, it may come to school, which it oftentimes did. So to build relationships, we ever get to the point where we have extra money, I'd like to see it even move down into the elementary and, build that relationship early on. But I've seen positive things having taught, like I said, kindergarten through 12th grade.
Thank you, Director Klein-Jerome. Any other board members have questions or comments?
Mr. President,
Director Gosa.
I would turn my camera on, but I dropped my computer and I don't know what I did, and now my camera won't work, so I apologize about that. First, I want to thank everyone for being a part of this discussion. I want to thank the Deb Stevenson for reaching out to me and inviting me to one of the NAACP education committee meetings where this was discussed quite a bit. I do want to thank everyone that's participated in this discussion and given their input. I agree along the lines with Director Hayes. I would like to see going forward an advisory committee where maybe some students, teachers, SRO, LULAC, as well as the NAACP involved to kind of work out if there's any issues with the program, or I guess to improve the program, because there's always room for improvement. One of my questions is, what is the overall budget for the SRO program, and how many SROs do we have right now? Because I believe it's a split between us and the city, but I believe the city pays the majority of it. Is that correct? And whoever can answer that.
Director Gosa, this is Administrator Spiegel. We'd have to get you the actual budget number because there's a split. I know we split the 2 full-time at Central and West between us and the district, and then we have the partnership with the Bechdel Trust, which added the 2 additional officers to focus on the middle schools. So I would say the city is the largest contributor to this program in partnership with the district, and then the special program with the Bechdel Trust.
Okay, that's kind of what I thought. And then since I guess with schools getting shut down early and going to the online thing, was there savings in that for like this school year, or was that still, I guess, carried through? I don't know how that works. I imagine there was contracts involved and stuff like that. So I didn't know if there was like money going to be left over for this school year from last year.
Director Gosa, this is Bob Kabilski. Those are details that haven't been worked out in finality. We do know that some of the SROs were reallocated to other duties, but at the same time, I can't give you definitive information with regard to the cost sharing and how that was adjusted as a result of the COVID, but certainly having those conversations.
Okay, thank you. I figured there would be something somewhere along the lines, but with everything going on the way it is, I understand that. Again, when I went to school, Officer Cole was our SRO at North High School. I've talked to Andy Nyrink before. Most of them that I talked to, they seem to enjoy the program and interacting with the kids. I know Officer Carter, I coached his son in Little League for quite a few years, and I've asked him and stuff, and a lot of the kids recognize him when he comes to the games and stuff like that, so they have that outside of that. I mean, I understand the premise of what we're trying to do with the program. I would think that would be what Chief Sikorsky would be trying for, is to get people on the community to understand police aren't the bad guy. Obviously, there's bad apples and everything, that ruin it for the majority of the good people. But that's how I see this program working, to kind of, I don't even know how to say it the right way, but it's like a meet in the middle type of thing, and just show, your everyday people, you live in the community, you shop at the grocery store, you eat food out and stuff like that, you're a real person. It's kind of like when we go out, I don't know if I explained that the best or not, but that's the way I guess I kind of see this program working, and being able to de-escalate the situations. And I also do agree, I think Dr. Kabilski kind of talked about that, the social emotional. I would like to see a way to try to get, I don't know, whether it be social workers or whatever, integrated into the school system as well, because there's just so many things stacked against kids coming to school sometimes, from at-home life stuff that goes on, that it would be nice, if we could facilitate every service for them. I understand that's a hard task, but if there's a way for us to try to figure out ways to work that way, I think the SRO program is a good program, and I do appreciate the mayor given his background, especially being a teacher in the district, and Karen for giving her background on that. I appreciate a lot of the things that the NAACP has brought and talked about, and I'm glad that we're having this discussion, and these are the kind of discussions we have to move things forward. So again, I greatly appreciate everybody's input and their time giving up their Thursday night for this, and I think that's all I got, Mr. President.
Are there any other comments or questions for the board? Director Postian.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone's participation tonight. I think we need to keep the lines of communication open. I respect the dedication of our SRO officers and continue to see the program work.
Any other comments from board members?
I do have one additional question, and this is for Dr. K. Dr. K, is it possible that from the last school year, the 1920 school year, is it possible that we can get the number of student arrests that we had due to SROs in the building? I don't know that that number has really been that high, but I would kind of like to see that data on that.
Linda, we'll certainly dig in for that. I would imagine there's a database that would give us that information, and we'll do our best to pull that up for you and the rest of the board.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank everyone who's participated. This is a very unique meeting for us. We've never had this many people on the computer or on the phone in a meeting. It's a valuable amount of time. It's a valuable meeting with valuable information. I want to thank all of you for giving it your best and trying to help us develop a more effective and more personalized program for our students. With that, I will adjourn the meeting.